Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. Void Shadows, the new DLC for Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader, has finally been released. And that means I can talk about the two new archetypes that have come with the DLC, Bladedancer and Executioner. Please keep in mind that at the time that I'm making this video, I do not have access to the major patch that will come with the Void Shadows DLC. So if there's some elements in that patch that interact with the archetypes, unfortunately I won't be able to speak to that. So be sure to check out the patch notes that I'll be sure to drop once I have that information. Alright, with that being said, let's not waste any time and go ahead and dive into the details. So the first archetype we're going to do is Bladedancer. It's available right at level 1 as opposed to Executioner, which is not available until level 16. Bladedancer is going to give you the characteristics weapon skill, strength, toughness, and agility. Out of those, no question, you want to focus on agility first. There's a ton of mechanics in Bladedancer that interact with agility, and then secondarily you'll want to focus on weapon skill for the same reason. After that, whether you focus on strength or toughness is up to you. And then when it comes to skills, obviously because you're going to be focusing on agility heavy, demolition is going to be very useful. If you plan to take Bladedancer into Executioner, I highly recommend that you also focus a great deal on Metakai. A lot of what you get in Executioner is going to make use of that skill. And so because of all of that, when you're looking at how to advance Bladedancer, Assassin rather is obviously a great choice because it's going to make great use of the agility skill that you already have, and it'll want you to continue to focus on it. Master Tactician is just okay, to be honest with you. I don't feel like Tactician fits thematically or mechanically with Bladedancer all that much. You can absolutely make use of it, but I wouldn't do it. Arch Militant works very well because Bladedancer comes with multiple melee area attacks, so you can switch up between singular attacks and then the melee area attacks, allowing you to easily stack up versatility. And then definitely Executioner works as long as you're stacking up Metakai. Executioner focuses a lot on being able to deal damage over time effects to multiple enemies. Because you have so many attacks that allow you to strike multiple foes with just one click of a button, it really interacts well with Executioner's mechanics. So these two archetypes pair well together. All right, with all that being said, let's get into the specifics. So as a Bladedancer, automatically at level 1, you're going to get Blade Dance, which allows you to make a number of melee attacks that scale with your agility bonus against random targets, including potentially your allies that are adjacent to you. And each attack is going to deal 50% of your normal damage. Now, this is a melee burst attack, and it does not count toward the attack limit per turn. So this character is going to be able to do 2 attacks, and really it's more than 2 attacks since you're attacking multiple enemies, but you're going to be able to do 2 attacks much earlier than any of your other party members. Now, in order to do this, you must have a sword equipped. And Owlcat has added a lot of swords into the game that have death cult mechanics, so it should be very easy to ensure that your character always has a sword. And if you have 2 swords equipped, you can still use this ability, but it's just going to lower how many melee attacks you perform with each sword. Needless to say, this ability is absolutely fantastic and allows you to really shred enemies that are around you. Now at level 3, you're automatically going to get Death from Above. It's going to cause you to leap in the air and land in a cell that has to be within a 3-cell radius from you. And then you're going to deal damage that scales with your agility and weapon skill bonus to all adjacent enemies. Now this movement does not provoke an attack of opportunity, but the cell must be in your line of sight, and you can use this ability multiple times per turn, but only for an amount of time equal to how many charges you have. And you gain more charges every time you kill a target, except when you kill an enemy using Death from Above. And similar to blade dance, you have to have a sword equipped in order to use this ability. Absolutely fantastic. Keep in mind, you can use death from above even if there are no nearby enemies, so it can also just be used for movement in general, and it's really powerful to be able to damage multiple enemies in this way. And again, it can be a great way to cause multiple enemies to experience certain damage over time or status effects that you want them to have. Now at level 4, you're going to get your ultimate ability, Death Waltz, and this causes you to use death from above against a target enemy, but you don't spend a charge. Instead, you immediately make a melee attack against that enemy, and then you repeat that combination a number of times that scales with your agility bonus. If there are no enemies or there are no other enemies within a 3-star radius, you'll continue just using the melee attack against that one enemy who's adjacent to you. So pretty much either way, whether you're in the midst of a ton of different enemies or you're just facing one boss, Death Waltz can be a fantastic way to really take over the fight. Now, similar to all the other archetypes, you do get a couple of different opportunities to upgrade Death Waltz. So the first option says upon using the ability, you'll immediately heal to full, and the cost of abilities that cost wounds is reduced by half until the end of combat. Not only does Bladedancer have some abilities that cost wounds, but I believe Executioner does as well. So this is absolutely something to consider, could be worth it. The second upgrade allows you to get 4 additional charges of Death from Above, and until the end of combat, Death from Above is going to deal additional damage that scales with your agility bonus. Obviously, agility is an attribute you're really going to want to focus on when using this archetype. It should be sky high. So once again, this is a great upgrade that you should definitely consider. In fact, I would say that this is probably even better than the first one, because the lost wounds only matters if you're getting hit a lot and you're on the brink of death, which hopefully you shouldn't be, because you should be using good tactics. The third upgrade until the end of combat, strikes made by you, including attacks from Death Waltz, reduce the enemy's weapon skill, armor, and dodge by amounts that scale with your agility bonus, and these penalties stack. So this is definitely something to consider if you're playing on harder difficulties. So I would say if you're just playing on daring, this probably isn't worth it. But maybe if you're playing on unfair or something similar, I don't know a whole lot about the tactics for doing an unfair run, but maybe this is something to consider there. And then finally, when using Death Waltz after killing an enemy, you will gain a 3% dodge bonus until the end of combat, and this stacks up to an amount of times equal to your agility bonus. So this could be useful if you find that Cabela or whoever it is you're using as a Bladedancer is getting absolutely shredded all the time. Personally, I wouldn't take this. There was a patch a little while ago that actually buffed up dodge as far as how much it helped party members to be able to defend themselves. So I don't think this is necessary. But again, depending on the difficulty or your play style, you may find out that this definitely works for you. At level 6, you're going to be able to start picking abilities. Acrobatic Artistry allows you to return to the cell where you started your turn, and this movement does not provoke attacks of opportunity, and if you use Death from Above, this movement will repeat all uses of that ability in reverse. So remember what I said, Death from Above can be used multiple times in one turn. Consequently, you could get far into enemy lines at the end of all your Death from Above uses. And so this is kind of like a get out of jail free card, allowing you to go deep into enemy territory, maybe take out a high value target, and then still go back to where it's safe. I didn't choose it, but there's definitely something to consider. Personally, I wouldn't take it. Oath of Vengeance is going to cost you an amount of wounds to use that scales with your level. And once you use it, you're going to select an ally. Until the end of combat, attacks made by you against enemies who have already attacked that ally are going to get additional hit chance and additional damage that both scale with your weapon skill and agility bonus. You can use this ability multiple times per turn, but the bonuses do not stack. So this can be great if you have somebody like Abelard who's serving as your tank and drawing in a lot of heat. You know he's going to be hit all the time. So you could just wait and see which enemies hit him and then make them the focus of your attacks. Otherwise, if you don't have a character that's really serving in that tank role, I probably wouldn't pick this up. Veil of Blades costs an amount of wounds that scales with your level, and it asks you to face a side of your choice and then immediately end your turn. Until the beginning of your next turn, you can dodge area attacks without moving. You're immune to all types of force movement. You gain 20% parry against attacks from that side, and you can now parry attacks made against adjacent allies. In addition to that, you can parry ranged attacks made from that side. The chance to parry a ranged attack is calculated as if it were a melee attack, where your weapon skill is equal to the hit chance of the attack. All the way around, this is a great defensive ability. Sometimes you're going to be completely surrounded and it's not really going to be advantageous for you to move away, because right when the next turn starts, you'll be ready to use some of your area of effect abilities. So this is a great option, and personally, I would go ahead and pick it up. Blood Oath costs a number of wounds that scales with your Bladedancer level. You're going to target a single enemy, and then your next attack against that enemy cannot be dodged or parried. If the attack kills the target, you're going to regain an amount of wounds that scales with your toughness bonus, and you're going to gain +1 action point along with an additional attack this turn. The ability can be used multiple times per turn, but it only grants the AP bonus once per round. This is definitely fantastic and a great way to deal with enemies who have really high defenses that you're having trouble breaking through. I would recommend picking it up. And then finally, Captive Audience. Your next attack inflicts bleeding on all targets hit. The targets must pass a toughness resistance test with a penalty or become immobilized for 1 round. And that penalty is going to scale with your agility bonus. All enemies immobilized by your ability count as full cover, and their allies for both you and your allies when adjacent to those enemies. Personally, I would skip this. Especially if you're going to go into Executioner, you will get an ability that allows you to basically automatically inflict bleeding on enemies. I would probably go ahead and pass on this. All right, now let's go through all the talents that are available with Bladedancer. Blade in his hand. Any attacks you made with a sword will gain a percentage bonus to damage equal to your agility bonus. And this bonus damage is doubled if using a two-handed sword. Cabela automatically comes with both a double sword option and a two-handed sword you can use, and both of them are death cult weapons. I would absolutely recommend picking this up. Blinding Blades cause enemies who are attacked by you to have their weapon and ballistic skill and perception reduced by an amount that scales with your weapon skill until the start of your next turn. However, these penalties do not stack, and because of that, I wouldn't bother picking this up. I don't feel like the penalties stack high enough, or rather get high enough, in order for this to be really worth it, at least not for a long time. Death Warden causes your Medikai skill to scale with weapon skill instead of intelligence, and you're going to deal increased critical damage that scales with your Medikai. And you can use medikits as if having a Medikai skill advancement or the corresponding feature or talent. You absolutely want to pick this up if you plan to go into Executioner. As I already said, you're going to really want to focus on Medikai, and so this skill is going, or this talent rather, is going to allow you to benefit from that even more. Race Against Death is going to give you a bonus to your maximum wounds that scales with dodge. Personally, I wouldn't bother with that. The amount of your wounds is really not how you defend yourself. It's really dodge that decides how long you're going to stay alive. This isn't worth picking up a talent. Rising Tempo causes each attack made by you to increase the damage of all subsequent attacks this turn by 5%. You can use this effect and it stacks up to 3 times. Area effects and burst attacks are considered to be single attacks for the purpose of this talent. I would absolutely recommend picking this up. Most turns or rounds, you're going to be able to attack at least 2 times, if not 3 or even 4, so this damage should really stack up for you. Steady Hand gives you a bonus to parry that scales by a percentage amount equal to your toughness bonus. It's also going to somewhat change how an attacker's melee critical hit chance bonus is determined. I don't completely understand what they've written here. An attacker's melee critical hit chance bonus determined by the difference between the attacker and the Bladedancer's weapon skill characteristic is halved. So I'm not completely sure what that means, but it basically seems like it's going to be harder for enemies to hit you with critical hits, which is of course a great thing, but you're going to be focusing on agility and then weapon skill and then most likely strength. Maybe you'll be able to get a little bit of toughness. I don't know if you're really going to be able to get enough toughness to make this worthwhile, but it's definitely at least something to consider. Sweeping motions causes your melee area attacks to cost 1 less AP. Absolutely, you want this. You should be using those melee area attacks all the time, so this will be great stuff. Anticipation is triggered when you parry a melee attack while under the effect of Veil of Blades, and this is going to allow you to deal 50% of your normal damage to the attacker. And also, while you're under the effect of Veil of Blades, your chance to deflect a ranged attack at an enemy is increased by 20%. If you're going to use Veil of Blades on a regular basis, which I did, I would absolutely recommend picking this up. Balancing on the Edge is going to allow you to use both a Desperate Measure and a Heroic Act in the same combat, but not in the same round. Also, whenever you use a Desperate Measure, you're going to gain +10 to weapon skill and +3 resolve. You should not be counting on using Desperate Measure because that means party members are dying, terrible things are happening, and more than likely your tactics are not up to snuff. So instead, you should use better tactics and then use mechanics that don't require Desperate Measure. Blessed Scars is triggered when you're healed for the first time in a round, and it's going to give you additional wounds that scale with your toughness bonus, and you're going to gain a +10 to toughness until the end of combat. These bonuses stack. So again, I didn't build toughness up all that much with Cabela. If you plan to, this is worth having. Otherwise, I would probably skip it. Blood Bonds is triggered when you use Oath of Vengeance and causes the ally you targeted with this ability to gain the same bonuses as you against all of the affected enemies. So again, this is fantastic if you have a tank such as Abelard who's drawing in a ton of heat and consequently is going to get major bonuses against all these enemies who are attacking him. Especially if you have Abelard set up as a Vanguard who's automatically going to counterattack when he's attacked in melee, this is really going to help him. Blood Rush is triggered when you use an ability that costs wounds and causes you to gain 3 movement points in the current turn. Moving around is not going to be an issue. Your agility is going to be sky high and you get other things that help you to move around anyway. I would skip this. Bloody Requiem is triggered when you kill an enemy and causes your resolve to be increased by 1 until the end of combat. There are other ways to increase resolve. Personally, I would leave that to other party members to figure out how to do it. I wouldn't take a talent. There are a bunch of other really great talents here that you need in order to increase your damage. I would skip this. Dance Partners requires you to have 2 swords equipped and your weapon skill is increased by an amount that scales with your agility bonus. Personally, I prefer the bonus to damage you get from having a 2-handed sword, so I skip this. But if you prefer 2 swords, which absolutely makes a lot of sense if you pick up that dual wielding skill that's available, then of course this is something you're going to want to get. Duelist allows you to deal additional damage that scales with your weapon skill bonus against enemies armed with a melee weapon, which frankly is going to be the vast majority of enemies that you face. This is definitely worth picking up. Escape Artist is triggered whenever you dodge an attack made by an enemy who attacks you for the first time, and it allows you to gain 1 charge of death from above. You should be dodging enemies left and right throughout combat, and you want as many charges of death from above as you can get, so definitely this is a skill you're going to want to pick up. Facing the End gives you +3 weapon skill and +3 agility for every injury you are currently suffering, and +10 weapon skill and +10 agility for every trauma. I'm the type of player, I don't leave trauma or injuries on my character at all, so even though the bonuses are nice, I can't see myself taking this because it would just weird me out leaving these debuffs on my character. Feel no pain is triggered when you use an ability that costs wounds and causes you to gain half of the wounds spent as temporary wounds. The number of temporary wounds gained cannot be decreased by effects that reduce the cost of abilities. Now, obviously, Bladedancer has multiple abilities that cost wounds in order for you to be able to use them. If you are using Bladedancer and do not plan to go into Executioner, then this talent makes sense and will probably help you. If you are planning to go into Executioner, this talent does not make sense because one of the Executioner abilities that you'll almost certainly want is going to reduce your wounds by 30% and replace them with temporary wounds. Now, remember, temporary wounds do not stack. The game is just going to use the largest source of temporary wounds that you have. So if you're using an ability on a regular basis that is taking 30% of your total wounds and making them temporary, that is going to override any other sources of temporary wounds you could potentially have, and consequently, this is rarely going to come into play. Grand Performance causes enemies who have been affected by captive audience to have their armor, dodge, and parry reduced by an amount that scales with your agility bonus until the end of combat. And this penalty is doubled for targets failing your toughness resistance test. Obviously, this is a fantastic debuff that's well worth considering. If you're using captive audience on a regular basis, no question, pick this talent up. Guillotine causes death from above to deal double damage to enemies that have less than 50% wounds. Absolutely, I would pick this up. I love using Cassia for her movement skills that play musical chairs with large swaths of enemies in the room. So a lot of them are going to have low health but not quite be dead. This is going to help ensure that when Cabela jumps in, she's going to immediately wipe out enemy groups. In Death's Footsteps is triggered every time an enemy is killed by one of your allies, and the amount of movement points you get on your next turn increases by 2. Movement is not really a big deal for you for the most part. Again, I would skip this. It Takes Two is triggered if you use Blade Dance against only one target and causes the last strike to deal double damage. There were a lot of instances where I used Blade Dance in this manner, so personally, I would pick this up. Killing Rhythm is triggered when you kill an enemy with an attack of opportunity and allows you to gain 1 charge of death from above. This isn't a high priority, but if you have an extra talent slot and want to pick something up, I definitely recommend getting this. The more death from above charges you have, the better. Paid in Blood is triggered when you have killed 4 enemies, and it causes your next ability, which requires spending wounds, to cost no wounds and instead restore 11 wounds. This is really nice. You're going to be killing massive swaths of enemies, so killing 4 enemies in one combat is no problem at all. You might do that on your very first turn, and so ensuring that every time that happens, it's going to heal you when you use one of those wound related abilities. This is definitely worth picking up. Promises of Blood causes Blood Oath to restore an additional +1 AP, bringing the total to 2. If you use Blood Oath a lot, obviously this makes sense. If you don't, go ahead and skip it. Shadow Dancer is triggered when you have less than 50% wounds and causes you to gain 12% dodge and 3 movement points. You're also going to gain 8% dodge and +2 movement points for every unconscious ally in combat. Again, this is one of those talents that depends on things going really poorly and your tactics falling apart. You shouldn't depend on that. Instead, you should use good tactics, so I would go ahead and skip this. Slip Away is triggered when you use Acrobatic Artistry and causes your dodge and cover efficiency to increase by an amount that scales with your agility bonus until the end of your next turn. This bonus is doubled against all attacks made by enemies during your turn, including extra turns. Again, I would skip this. You shouldn't be standing in cover. You should take advantage of the additional damage bonus that occurs when you are not in cover, and just in general as a melee combatant, it's rare that you're going to have access to cover. You shouldn't try to strategize around that. Spinning Blades. Whenever you parry an attack, the number of attacks made by the next Blade Dance is increased by 1, and this effect stacks up to an amount of times that's equal to your agility bonus. You should be using Blade Dance all the time. It's great against not only crowds of enemies but also bosses, so being able to increase the number of attacks is very powerful, especially since your agility bonus should be sky high. I would definitely pick this up. I'd probably wait a little bit to pick this up until you have your agility a little bit higher, but you'll definitely want this. And then finally, Unforgiving is triggered when you lose any number of wounds and causes your next attack to deal 8% more damage. If the loss causes you to suffer an injury or trauma, the damage is going to be doubled. And I'm sorry, it's not 8%, it's actually an amount that scales with your toughness bonus. So absolutely, it's going to be nearly impossible for you to consistently escape combat without taking any damage. So getting automatically at least an 8% bonus is very, very nice. And that's it. That's the full breakdown of all the different abilities that are within Bladedancer. I, of course, plan to do a full build of Cabela, but I wanted to wait until we got the patch notes that are going to come with the DLC so I can have a complete understanding of where the game sits right now. So I'm going to release the mechanics breakdowns for Bladedancer and Executioner first, and then once that's done, I'll absolutely come out with a build for Cabela, and I'll redo some of those builds for previous party members so you have a better understanding of how to use them. Now, looking forward to hearing all of your feedback. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If there's any questions that you have or anything that you feel like should have been different or that you didn't get out of the video, definitely let me know in the comments below. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.